All right, folks. In keeping with our post-election analysis here, we warned you, Arab Americans in Michigan, tell Kamala Harris. So the big winner in Dearborn, Michigan was actually Donald Trump because Trump got 45% of the vote, and then you had Jill Stein take a lot of votes from Kamala Harris. I know the Greens are too shy to put it that way. I don't know why, but yes. Yes, Jill Stein ate into Kamala's vote count quite a bit. So they definitely made an impact in Dearborn on Election Day. When Fox News called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump in the early hours of Wednesday, all but confirming that he would be the next president of the United States, there were a handful of Arab activists left at a watch party in Dearborn, Michigan. Genocide is bad politics, said one attendee at the event, which had Palestinian and Lebanese flags hanging outside its doors. As the reality of another Trump presidency set off anger and sorrow from many Democratic commentators, at the Arab American gathering, there was a sense of indifference, if not vindication. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris had ignored the community's calls for reconsidering the unconditional U.S. support for Israel. The vice president also continued to assert what she calls Israel's right to defend itself despite the brutal atrocities in Gaza and Lebanon. If you ask, well, which American outlet is printing this? None. This is, of course, Al Jazeera. Activist Adam Abu Salah said part of the reason why Harris lost was her decision to side with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the expense of alienating the Democratic base, Arab and Muslim Americans, as well as young people and progressives. It's not our fault. They cannot vilify our community, Abu Salah said. We've been warning the Democrats for over a year now, and the Democrats continue to downplay what's going on. He added that Harris's main message to the Arab community was to warn of the dangers of a Trump presidency. This tactic failed to work as voters in the area were laser focused on the continuing war in the Middle East that affected many of them personally. In the Arab-majority suburb of Dearborn, anger over Israel's U.S.-backed assault on Gaza and Lebanon was tangible at the ballot box. Harris lost the city to Trump by more than 2,600 votes. President Joe Biden beat Trump by more than 17,400 votes, so that is a 20,000 vote swing that helped the Republican former president reclaim Michigan. Now, what did we say in the previous segment? This was such a wave that you can't point to any one thing and say, aha, but for that, you'd have won. But this did put a dent in her total. Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein, who centered opposition to the war in her platform, also performed relatively well in the city, growing her party support from 207 votes in 2020, great showing for Howie Hawkins there, to more than 7,600 this year. Hussein Dabaheh, I don't know how you would say that, a Lebanese-American political consultant in the Detroit area, noted that Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, a Democrat, significantly outperformed Harris in Dearborn, receiving more than 9,600 votes than the vice president. The Arab community said, we're anti-genocide. We supported the candidates that supported the community, and we stood against the candidates that stood against the community, Dabajeh told Al Jazeera. It is unclear what a Trump presidency will mean for Arab and Muslim Americans and the country at large. I hope it's something good. I hope the country comes together. I hope Democrats are brought to their senses, Dabajeh said. While the former president has a long history of anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant statements and policies, he has promised to bring peace to the region. Trump also softened his antagonistic tone towards Arab and Muslims as he courted their communities in Michigan. Yeah, before we go on, I want to put a little bit of a marker there. What did we say in the closing week or so of the campaign? That Trump, in going on the Joe Rogan show, in bringing the Muslim leaders on the stage, he looked like he was working his ass off to win.
Right. He looked
voters.
like he wanted the job. He didn't look, see, this is what's funny, because you put on Trump, he's this trust fund billionaire, which he is, but he did not read like he was taking anything for granted. He did not read like he assumed he had a right to the job. He seemed like he was campaigning. he seemed like he was asking you for your vote.
And he was campaigning to expand his coalition.
Right.
Young men don't typically vote. Young people tend to vote blue. So I'll go on the Joe Rogan podcast and see if I can win over some young men. Muslims and Arabs tend to vote overwhelmingly Democratic. He sensed a major vulnerability this time, which he was correct to sense that vulnerability. And he thought, hey, why not bring some of these Muslim leaders on stage at a rally? Like, let's actually grow the base and expand the tent. What did Kamala Harris do? The exact opposite. She campaigned around Michigan with Liz Cheney. Her final pitch, and by final pitch, I don't just mean the last week, I mean the last month of the campaign, was exclusively targeting the suburban, independent, conservative, sort of Lincoln Project type voter. That was her exclusive pitch at the expense of everyone else.
Yep.
And look, the reason I predicted that it would succeed, and like I said there was less than 60% chance. I wasn't confident in this prediction, but it was my prediction. I own it. I thought there was a greater than 50-50 chance she would succeed because I thought that's what the electorate would look like. I sensed a lot more despair and indifference than actually existed. I didn't think this would be a wave election. I thought the country is tired. They're over it. They've just thrown their hands up in the air and said, fuck it. That wasn't the case. Turns out these appeals that Trump made to these different groups worked. It rallied them. And they turned out in numbers that overcame Kamala's numbers, which were not terrible in the swing states. This is the other thing. The reason the Republicans won the popular vote is because in very blue states like Illinois and New Jersey and even New York, you had red surges that made those states closer than they should have been. Trump lost Illinois by like 4 points. He lost New Jersey by 6 points. He lost New York by 11 points. He's supposed to win New York by 20. Illinois and New York are high population states, and so those numbers are what pad the popular vote. They are what explain a lot of these demographic inroads that he made. But in the swing states, like Pennsylvania, for example, Kamala Harris won Philadelphia by north of 400,000 votes. Conventional wisdom says you're supposed to win Pennsylvania if you can clear a 400,000 vote margin in Philly. Not all the time. Not when they show up as well. It turns out Trump beat him. He had the numbers to beat him. And part of why he got those numbers up was by doing the kinds of outreach that this article just talked about, which Kamala actively refused to do. She refused to do it. She pushed them out so that she can get the conservative women in. That was a bargain that ended up being a loser.
And Trump,
and I'll eat shit. I thought it was going to work. I thought there was enough despair in the country that was going to work, but there wasn't.
And Trump actually wound up gaining with suburban women. Like that, I personally would never have seen coming. I would never have seen that coming, that he was actually going to gain with suburban women. We can only really speculate on why that is. Certainly, it seemed like their pitch was tailor-made. I mean, it was tailor-made for that audience. They thought, hey, they vote in greater numbers, which is what we thought too. Well, yeah, they're going after a demographic that even if they lose some minority support in the working class, they're making it up with a larger demographic. So even if they only pick up 2 points there, it'll outweigh losing maybe 10 points in a smaller segment of the population. Did not work out that way because he actually gained with the demographic that they went all in on. That is where you have to get into, okay, there's economics, but maybe obviously the abortion issue did not have the potency with that audience that they expected. Part of that might be that a lot of those people, they're going to be able to get an abortion either way. You know, back in the day when abortion was illegal, people used to go to Puerto Rico if they had money. You know, people of that class are not as personally affected by that. So that could be part of it. In terms of young men, I've been saying this for as long as we've had the show. Men in general and white men in particular are a very large voting bloc. Building your brand around hating men, well, what did you think the long-term political ramifications of that were going to be? Did you really think that presenting the argument that that masculinity is toxic and we need more feminized, castrated men, and if you don't fit that mold, you're toxic? What did you think was going to happen? Of course they ran to a gorilla like Trump who pounds his chest. Of course they did. Of course they did. You've had this ongoing, very blatant war against against white people generally, against masculinity specifically. Like, hey, man, did you think that all men are like the castrated libs that you knew at Barnard? Is that what you thought? That all men were going to go, yeah, we really need to tone down the testosterone. It's really not good. Did you think that's how most men were going to react to being talked to that way? Like, you were begging to lose a generation of men, and you did. You did. It took a little while for it to really set in, but this election is where you really saw the impact of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that too. I think a lot of that is inseparable from economics. Like I said, I
Sure.
believe that is what really dictates a lot of these trends.
But if you cared about economics, you probably would not speak in that way to a demographic. You just wouldn't even present yourself like that.
Yeah, but I think it's born mostly of that. He brought Arab and Muslim officials and imams to the stage during his rallies and called them great people. Trump also visited Dearborn and listened firsthand to demands to end the war, which Harris failed to do. Ali Al-Farjala, a 32-year-old Iraqi-American real estate agent in Dearborn, said that for all his flaws, Trump represents a change from the Biden-Harris administration that has been unflinchingly supporting the Israeli assault on Gaza and Lebanon. He stressed that the election is not the end of political engagement, saying that the community will press Trump to deliver on his promise of bringing peace to the region. It doesn't stop here, Al-Farjala told Al Jazeera. We have to work to make sure our issues are heard, to stop the genocide in Gaza, stop the invasion of South Lebanon, and let Palestine have its own state. We're hopeful about that. That's our number one priority for this community. He also said that Harris supporters' lesser of two evils pitch to the community backfired because many voters could not see a worse evil than the administration providing the bombs that were killing their families and destroying their hometowns. Well, what did we say? It was exactly pretty much word for word how we've been framing that the whole time. And we've been taking our cues from them. So no surprise there, obviously. While both major candidates back Israel, the Harris campaign committed a series of unforced errors that further alienated the community in Michigan and beyond, Arab American advocates told Al Jazeera. So, just to look at the damage, Dearborn, Michigan, 2020, Biden 88, Trump 11. Final result here, Trump 43, Harris 36, Stein 18. So you talk about a swing, and talk about the disloyalty of the Democratic Party, too. I mean, you talk about, it's not just that they take workers for granted or they take certain groups for granted. You talk about a group that's been taken for granted. They make a lot of noise about how they take the black vote for granted. What about the Muslim and Arab vote? Look at that, 88%. And don't forget, Michigan was a swing state last time. 88-11. You don't think, hey, they represent a key voting block for me, so maybe I should try and slow this genocide down? No. Mm-hmm. The hell with them. That was what the Democrats' attitude towards them was. We'll bring Liz Cheney to Michigan. And boom, there you have it. Trump 43, Harris 36,
Liz
Stein
Cheney,
18.
that is the way to win them back. It is very typical of liberal class politics on the whole. They like gestures. They like to go protest at the airport. Oh, the Muslim ban, this is terrible. But when it comes to doing anything that might cost them something like AIPAC money,
right,
then they don't really give a fuck about you. It is a party. It is a movement. It is a politics of empty gestures, complete lack of substance. Now, whether you like Trump, don't like him, like his policies, don't like his policies, there's substance there. They're not lying. They're not kidding. They actually mean all that shit. If you like it, you're voting for something that actually reflects what you like. With the Democrats, if you're actually on the left, what are you getting? Nothing.
Yep.
Gestures. Kente cloth.
And, of course, Dearborn results, Trump +7, Rashida Tlaib +32. She ended up doing, of course, very well. What did they say in the article? Those who support the community get support from the community. Those who don't. And there you have it. So Dearborn gets to tell Kamala Harris, we told you so, and they did. Now, I don't know which way to look at this, as a fortunate thing or an unfortunate thing. Unfortunately, what makes that story, I guess it's unfortunate, what makes that story a little bit less potent is the fact that Trump won by such wide margins anyway that, it's easier for the media to sort of ignore that because it didn't cost them Michigan, right? Because it wasn't close enough to cost them Michigan. But they did their part. I mean, they seemed to run up the numbers that they wanted to. By they, I mean the Green Party in Dearborn.
Please clap.